right. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Hello, everyone.
Well, cool. So as I was thinking about this 10 years, right, which congratulations, by the way, that's amazing. I'm reminded of something my sister said to me about her young children at the time. She said, the years are short, but the days are long. And I feel like that is very true in this world as well, where I've been in this space for 8 years, you've been longer than I have, and when you look back, you're like, wow, that went quick. But day to day, it's a slog, right? I think those of us who are veterans of this can all agree, like the day to day, there's just like a lot of pushing and boulders uphill and the boulder rolls back down over you. So, what are some of the things that have kept you going through this last 10 years of ups and downs?
Yeah, so starting out, it's great to celebrate 10 years in XR for us. That's why we're here at AWE, which is really awesome. And there's definitely a sense of like, wow, we've been at it for 10 years, and that's really great. And we're still around, which is really cool. But reflecting back, we started out, we had the good fortune of starting out really early in the space. And I still remember the first time we were experimenting with the early Samsung Gear VR, and went up to Valve in Seattle and got to experience the first kind of room scale demo that they had, and had that mind-blowing moment of presence. That was literally 2014, so that was exactly 10 years ago. But in retrospect, as we started to build a business and kind of go through all of the different phases and waves that we had to work through, there's certainly the days were long, very, very often, very frequently. We had to figure out how to, really assess what the market opportunity is, what the technology capability is, and almost like surfing, you're kind of like having to surf the waves in order to figure out what's best. Happy to get into some specifics, just to give you some specific examples. So, in the first wave, right, when there was a combination of the kind of the mobile platform starting to emerge, and PC VR, of course, was kind of front and center with the DK1. And our strategy was at the time, well, look, there's a lot of really interesting capability on the high end. How do you take advantage of all of the compute power, the CPU and the GPU, and kind of really lean into what's really special and magical about the medium, which back then was really that first feeling of like, you're in VR, you're feeling presence, this is clearly not looking at a flat screen. And so that was kind of the nexus for our first title, which was the Blue, the Whale Encounter.
How many people have seen that? How many people saw that as their first VR experience? Oh, that's interesting, because I've shown that to a lot of people, and they had that as their first VR experience. And when, we were talking about this before, when the whale swims over you, obviously they were in headsets, so I couldn't actually see them, but I could kind of sense the light going off, right? The light being like, oh. And I think, we were talking about this before in the prep room. I think a through line for everyone here, or for a lot of people here, maybe not everyone, is you remember your first VR experience. Right? And you remember it like it was yesterday, and you remember why it made you do this when you could have done a lot of other things that probably would have been easier, right? So I just want to shout that out, because I think the Blue is really foundational for creativity in this space and for a lot of people. And it's based on a real experience you had, right?
Yeah, indeed. Actually, that was specifically, I had a really amazing experience where I was swimming with, I got an opportunity to swim with a real whale. I was out in the Turks and Caicos Islands. With a friend of mine, and there was a giant humpback whale with her calf that kind of swam right below us, and had this amazing moment where I got to sort of see the size of the whale's eye, which was the size of my whole face and head, and that really left an incredible lasting impression on me. Felt a very strong sense of connection. And when I experienced presence for the first time in VR, it reminded me of that experience. Yeah. There was this kind of strange, uncanny connection of this transportive ability. And that was the nexus of the Blue Whale Encounter. But then to the point of like the long days and the challenges, as we developed that product, it was hugely successful. We had lots of fans and lots of interest in the product, which was really wonderful, and people still enjoy it as a first demo today, 10 years later. But the figuring out what the actual business model is, how do you win in the app stores, was, we went through multiple phases of exploring that, which we did. And to this day, people tell us, well, why didn't you do more with the Blue? And that was because of a sequence of events where we're like, okay, the adoption rate of the platform of the platform in general was taking its time. We had a really great partnership with HTC at the time, and we still do to this day. In fact, they recently backed us in some expanded fundraising. And we started looking at what the opportunities in location-based entertainment is, right? And from there, we started to really see that there was a lot of, this is all pre-COVID, so there was a lot of interest in how do you take a high-end experience that may not be possible on a mobile headset. Mm-hmm. And the way to do that was in these location-based venues. So we did a couple of projects. One was with Warner Brothers, based on the Harry Potter IP, which was an incredible sort of full room scale experience where you're with 6 other people, human avatars, you're all communicating together and going on this amazing adventure. And that was all kind of built in the Unreal Engine. And we learned a lot from that. We learned a lot from being able to work with sort of a major IP, major Hollywood IP, and delivering kind of the true potential of a VR experience. It was kind of like a mini version of like, hey, what might it be like in the future in the metaverse where you're human scale, almost in cosplay with working with other people, but fully immersed in a different virtual world. We looked at that business model, and it was just right on the edge. There were challenges around throughput and the complexity of the hardware, and so we released it. We got that done, but again, it was like, okay, where does this go? And then COVID hit.
Yes.
Which was a really interesting challenge for us, and in looking at how that whole LBE business really started to slow down for a while, obviously, and then kind of coming into 2021, a lot of interest in the metaverse, right, started to emerge. And by then, we had already produced, several titles, had experimented with kind of the full range of experience that are possible on the devices. And it became interesting to see, how do we look at, now that all of the technology has advanced, you've got more capabilities in the headsets, sort of what's next, what do you look at next? And from there, we kind of huddled and built a whole infrastructure around making it easier for developers around the world to collaborate together. That's our virtual studio platform, which we use to this day to produce all of the various projects and content that we're doing. And really kind of thought through, okay, what's next? And coming into 2024, now we've got a whole lineup of new products that we're excited about, which we'll be announcing very soon.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that one thing that you've been able to do very successfully, which I think is a testament to your longevity, is the fact that you've been able to pivot and change very quickly based on like market conditions, headset conditions, creative conditions, geopolitical conditions, pandemic conditions, right? And I think that's something that we kind of have to do in this industry because things are shifting like so constantly. But I want to go back to the Harry Potter piece for a second. And where do you see things moving forward in terms of like building stuff around pre-existing IP versus building like original content? And how do you see that kind of split moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many examples out there of very successful executions where you've got a major Hollywood IP. What's If with Marvel on the Apple Vision Pro, if you guys have checked it out, is a super interesting example of where there is the opportunity to continue to innovate, to take advantage of the new capability of the technology married to an existing IP. It's also very clear, you look at the App Store charts, that some of the most successful, commercially successful titles were all original IPs. So in this next wave of surfing that we're doing as a company, is we're doing a combination. We're very much focused on really working with brands and IP holders to help shepherd them into an optimal execution of a particular experience, as we did with Harry Potter. We're starting to see a lot of interest from non-entertainment brands as well as entertainment. So we have a number of titles that we're developing there. But in terms of the original IP, the blue continues to resonate with people. And
I mean, technically, the ocean is pre-existing IP.
yes, it is. It is
We're not going to
definitely.
split hairs.
It's evergreen or ever blue.
Yes.
So we have some exciting plans in kind of taking advantage of the current landscape of the ecosystem of hardware and building the next version of that.
So I'd love to talk about distribution challenges, because I think as somebody who's been building in the space for a long time, you've been building in the space for a long time as well, right? It's really hard to get your stuff out. You know, the Quest store they only accept a certain number of pieces per year. They have a very clear focus on the type of pieces they want to accept and distribute, right? And they're by far and away still the biggest. And then, you know, the App Store the Apple App Store for Vision Pro is just starting to come up. I mean, it's been out for 4 or 5 months now, right? And one thing that frustrates me is I'll go see a piece at Tribeca, or I'll go see a piece at a festival, or somebody will show something to me, and I will fall in love with it, and then I'll say, I want to show this to everyone, and it's like, too bad, you know, right? And you see people pouring their heart and souls into creating this content, and it gets shown once or twice, or, you know, on a festival circuit, and then it just vaporizes into nowhere. And so I'd love to sort of pick your brain a little bit about what you see for the next 10 years, right? How is the distribution model going to evolve? Because I think that's obviously super critical to the growth in the space.
That's a great question. We spend quite a bit of time thinking through that and talking about that, and it's a big question, so we'll kind of break it up a little bit. So clearly, with XR in general, there's clear evidence that if you're in a B2B business, whether it's doing enterprise or entertainment, you don't have to worry about publishing in the App Store.
Right.
And there's, you know, very significant, you know, revenue streams being generated by multiple companies, both in entertainment and in non-entertainment. And that makes a lot of sense, and that's growing, and that's really wonderful and really awesome. I think if you're a creator and developer that wants to get your distribution of your creation, of course, it's a whole other challenge. And in today's world, similar to mobile, you basically, it's an App Store world, right? Now, looking ahead, though, I think it's interesting because it's a super exciting time if you look at, you know, the incremental year-on-year improvements in not only the capability of each headset, but also the number of manufacturers that are now coming onto the scene, not only with Apple Vision Pro, but, you know, Google Android XR and Samsung next year, and all of the things that we can look ahead to. Very broad range of hardware. It's going to become increasingly hard to differentiate at the hardware level. So then you look, on top of that is the operating system stack.
Yep.
Meta announces their Horizon OS being open source, Android XR. How is there going to be differentiation at that level where a creator and the developer can say, you know, that is the particular platform I want to build on because ultimately that's how I'm going to win. But then at the top of that stack is an app store.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we look at that and it's like, okay, is this going to be once again, which is the store that wins? And I need to be in both on iOS and Android, and Windows if you're on PC, of course. And we do think there is an interesting alternative. Of course, over the last 3-4 years, with the evolution of decentralized infrastructure, a lot of talk in the open metaverse and WebXR around open standards and open models that will allow different publishing mechanisms, similar to the World Wide Web, where you have direct publishing, where you can have a direct relationship with the creator and the developer. So as we think about that, of course, you do need to play in the stores and figure that out. That dynamic does continue to be challenging, and the days continue to be long there for many creators and devs. But I think as we look at, for example, what we want to do with the Blue, we don't think the Blue should only live in an app store. We think it should be much more permeable and accessible across devices in a more decentralized fashion.
Yeah.
And we're figuring out what is that. And that's still developing. And there's different examples of multiple platforms out there where they're exploring how the metaverse can be these connected virtual worlds that we can play in and build audiences around in that capacity.
Yeah, totally. So another thing that I hear a lot from creators is funding challenges, right? I mean, big companies will announce, you know, we're going to do this fund or that fund, and then 6 months or a year later, there's a reorg, and poof, the money goes away. And it's hard to get this content funded for the most part. And you've been fortunate to work with big pre-existing IP, so at least you have that funding source. But talk to me about like how you've overcome some of these funding challenges, especially for the non-pre-existing IP pieces.
It's really hard. There's no shortcuts to it, right? I mean, I think we certainly don't have any magic formula in terms of how you go about whether it's fundraising for the company or generating enough interest in order to have a commercial or a co-financier on a specific project. It's very much a case-by-case initiative. I think we were fortunate to partner with strategic investors like HTC and Epic that saw value in what we're building beyond the revenue from any one particular execution. That sort of we're on a trajectory that's helping, help rise the tide for everyone. And so, you really have to pick carefully which strategy you're approaching. I spent a bunch of time raising venture capital, and that has its own, set of issues, and it's too long of a topic to discuss, obviously here. I continue to be encouraged what small indie devs are able to do with very little. My only suggestion, perhaps, would be to be super passionate about the thing you're doing. It's very cliche to say that, but it's true, because the further along you can go with little and the more you can show, whether it's a single customer or a single user or a single fan that's happy with your product and you've got something built, even though it's a small MVP, you're way better off than sort of hoping that your PowerPoint deck is going to somehow magically cause a check to flow your way.
No,
it's
the interest rate isn't zero anymore. Those days that ship is way out in the ocean.
Very, very clear. Yeah.
Well, listen, we've only got a few more minutes. Unfortunately, I feel like we could go for a long time, but we've got to keep moving. So I did want to ask you about the next 10 years, right? We talked about the previous 10 years, and obviously you don't have a crystal ball. None of us do. Otherwise, none of us would have been like, let's do location-based entertainment in 2019. Didn't foresee the end of the world happening.
Yes.
But what are you excited about? What do you see coming in terms of developments? Like, what should we be looking for in the next 10 years?
Well, first thing I'll say is that, it's overwhelming to think of the next 10 years, right? So we try to have some long-term thinking in what we do and how we go about things. But thankfully, the only thing you really have to figure out is what you're doing tomorrow, like what your next move is, which we learned is a smarter approach than trying to shoot too far ahead. But right now, we look at the maturity of the location-based space, I think, is really interesting. If you're a creator and a developer and you want to get something original out, there is really a pattern there where the business model really works, where you can get a certain amount of throughput and the business starts to actually work. So I think that we will continue to see a lot more location-based experiences, whether they're along the whole spectrum, from pure immersive VR all the way through pure play AR, and I think that's happening across the industry, entertainment, non-entertainment. So we're building there, and I think that will be an interesting part of the next 3, 4, 5 years, easily, if not beyond. Secondly, I think that, as we were saying earlier, because you now have this exciting ecosystem of different headsets, what we're super excited about is this weird thing that's happening where you can really start to see how we say we're weaving reality, in that you can foresee being able to wear lighter and lighter weight headsets next year at AWE 3, 4 years from now, where the world as we know it is completely blending, where you can do a search and replace in real time on your environment. So you don't like red cars, you can change them to blue cars as you're driving down the freeway. So I think there's an element of what excites us is the direction that is very clear with the tech and where it's going. It's actually happening. It's frustrating day to day to feel that it's happening so slowly because we want things to move faster. But a lot of what science fiction has envisioned. So that continues to be a very exciting opportunity for us to continue to work with creators and innovators and continue to be at the bleeding edge of the technology to engage fans and audiences in interesting ways. So that's definitely a key part. with, as a category, Tim is here. He's our new EVP of Business Development, and we're spending more time talking about, okay, how do we actually approach different companies and brands that are looking to figure out what the next move is. And you kind of have to look at it in sort of, we try to think of sort of in 12-month waves, like what's right around the corner?
Yep.
Well, an interesting thing that's right around the corner is clearly immersive video is now starting to become interesting again, and you're starting to see opportunities for brands to express themselves in that way, and so we'll go after that. A lot of it is sort of tactical moves on a kind of a 12-month cycle basis. And that will get us to the next 10 years, as we got to so far. Yeah.
Well, let's see if we're here 10 years from now. I'm sure we will be. Well, congratulations again. And I think we have time for like one question, maybe? One or two questions? I'll let our timekeeper tell me. Do we have time for one or two questions? Okay, if anyone
Looks
has any
like it.
questions.
Not too many hands at once, please.
Questions, comments, concerns. I have a question.
Sure.
Do you guys still have those I love VR buttons? I got one at your office like in 2018.
We do still have some. Yeah, I don't have any with me here, unfortunately, but yeah.
I gave mine away a few years later to a woman who's reading my tarot cards. She told me as part of my reading that I had to give her the button. So I'll get that from you later.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you again so much. Congratulations
Absolutely.
again.
Great to be
Thanks
here.
everyone for coming out and sticking with us. I know it's the last day, and I know there's just a tremendous amount of panels you could be seeing. So I appreciate you coming to this one. Please, please, please stick around. The next talk up after this is Victor, who's at the back, presenting about JFK Memento, which is a piece that I was also fortunate enough to be involved with, and it won the best art or film last night at the Augies, if folks were there. So
Congratulations.
definitely stay for Victor's talk. It's going to be amazing. And yeah, thanks again so much for hanging out.
Awesome. Thank you.